When Henry was going around the world as a geologist, Alice had a lot of time on her hands. And so Alice Ferguson wrote him and said, I really think we should have a place in the country to be able to get away and unwind and to have our friends. And she started looking, and this place didn't look good, that place didn't look good. Then she found this old run-down tobacco farm in southern Maryland on a dirt road. And she came up to this hill and looked across at all this beauty, and then she said, Henry, we got to buy it. So not very much longer after that, she signed a contract to purchase Hard Bargain Farm, which is where we are today. When they purchased the farm, there was an old 19th century house on it. No problem, we're going to redo this. So they hired some local people. The very first day they got up on a ladder and the entire house fell down except one chimney. Alice was a can-do kind of lady, and so she said, no problem, I'll just design one. It's just captivating. Anybody who sees it says, I love this. I absolutely love this. Why don't we go into the house and see what's in there? So we just walked up the steps from this beautiful garden, and we're now in what would have been the lifeblood of the social life of Henry and Alice Ferguson. This was the living room, and they had wonderful parties with their friends and acquaintances. And they would come and they would play here. Henry and Alice thought this was a play place, and that's what they wanted it to be. Henry was called Uncle Harry to his relatives and Fergie to all of his friends. And when I was a little girl, I knew him as Fergie. And he was a wonderful old guy who would wear a kilt. He had a patch over one eye because it was put out by a rock. And that rock was because he was a geologist and he was testing out a rock, and a piece of the rock flew up in his eye. And he would come here and hold forth and sit in a chair with his kilt and his pipe and his patch. And he was a little guy, and I thought he was the most amazing man ever. He was full of little stories, and everybody loved Fergie. So let's move on to Alice. Alice was the daughter of a Navy admiral, and they lived quite a comfortable life in Washington, D.C. And she was an artist. She was trained at the Corcoran Gallery of Art. She painted mostly in oils. The ones that we have here, this is Alice, and reclining, and she titled it Tired. And a lot of her paintings were done from photographs. And if you look at this, can you see this? Okay, if you look at this photograph, it's the same thing, isn't it? Yeah. And so most of these I've actually seen in the archives that we have of the Fergusons as photographs. And she loved her horses. And they would ride all around the neighborhoods here. They were old 18th century houses, and they would go to all of these ruins, and she would write about them in a book called Adventures in Southern Maryland. And so you ought to actually look that up. It's on Kindle, and also the Alice Ferguson Foundation has it for sale. And then another thing which I loved to do was to sled down these hills. And the next painting that you'll see is sledding back when, in the early days. That looks to me like it was in the 1930s and 1940s. This hill was just the best darn place for sledding, and people still want to come here and sled. And then as children we would come, because if you lived in the neighborhood you had to be here at 4 o'clock on Saturday. And we would play out in the garden, and there are these wonderful paths, and we would go up and down the paths, then we would run to the river and run back. And it was just an idyllic childhood. And I didn't care what the adults were doing in this room, but I loved what was happening out there, whether it was walking along the river or walking in the fields or in the forest or wading in the creek.